How about let's do some science? Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and a little episode of experimentation. So what is the goal of today's experiment video? Well, what I want to do is using the paints that I have and the decal setting solvent solutions that I have, I want to see how those setting solutions react with the different paints that I have. So let me introduce the players in this particular experiment. First, we have All Clad Aqua Gloss Clear, and I'll explain what that's for in a minute. We've got Mr. Hobby Accretion, Mr. Hobby Aqueous, AK Real Color, Tamiya Acrylic, Vallejo Model Air, Ammo by MIG Acrylic Color, Mission Models Acrylic, Vallejo Metal Color Acrylic. Those are the paints. For the decal setting solutions, I've got Micro Set and Micro Sol, which are used together to apply decals, Tamiya Mark Fit, and Walters Solvaset. As you can see here, I've got my paint mule with all the colors applied. So, first thing, on all of these paints, I used the brand specific acrylic thinners. I didn't use any lacquer thinners, no hardware store lacquer, no Tamiya lacquer, no Mr. Hobby or Mr. Color leveling thinner, any of that type of stuff. I used all acrylic thinners. For the accretion, I used the accretion thinner. For the aqueous, I used the aqueous thinner, and so on through the paints. So let me change my camera angle here and I'll talk a little bit more about what I did and the things I want to find out. So what I did, using each brand's specific thinner, I sprayed an opaque layer of paint on both of these wings here on top of Ammo by MIG black primer. Ammo by MIG primer is the same as Ultimate Modeling Products primer and Badger Stynylrez. Badger Stynylrez allows these other companies to rebrand Stynylrez primer. So I just put a layer of the black on there. Wasn't too concerned about how smooth or how rough it was, but I just wanted to have primer underneath all of the plastic so I'd get good adhesion with the paint. Then after I applied the paint, I taped lengthwise on the wings with just regular Tamiya masking tape and sprayed the lower portion with Aqua Gloss Clear. That way I can test and see how much of an effect the decal setting solutions have on the bare paint compared to a clear coated paint. So in order to kind of keep track of what's going on, I made myself this little chart here listing the different paints and then which solution I'm going to be using. I have a column for, it's actually a double column for bare paint and the clear coated paint. And the two things I want to look for on each section, each segment, each test is discoloration and or lift. And all I'll do is if, say for example, I'm on the Mr. Hobby Accretion on the bare plastic, I get some discoloration, I'll just put an X. If I get lift, I'll put an X. On the clear coat, I'll just put an X if I have one of these two things happen to the paint. So with that, let's get cracking. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a little dab of Micro Set on the paints. And what I'm going to do is, in order to keep it consistent across the board. I'll put a little dab of the micro set. I'll let it set for 10-15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and then I'll come back and do my test. And basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a cotton swab, clean cotton swab for each one, and I'll just rub it a little bit like you would do in applying a decal, and see if any discoloration occurs, and at the same time see if there's any lift. So here we go. Micro set. Maybe I'll do a couple sections at a time just to kind of speed things up. So we got some micro set right here. On the accretion, and then on the aqueous, put some there. Now you'll notice there's a lot of surface tension stuff going on here, so it's more puddling up than soaking in. So we'll let that set. Okay, and using the old cotton swab here, I'll just kind of rub it and basically dry it all off of there. Okay, there's no discoloration on the accretion. And on the aqueous, there is also no discoloration. So Mr. Hobby accretion and Mr. Hobby aqueous on the bare paint with the micro set, no problems. So let's move on to the AK Real Color and the Tamiya. So let's go with dab right there. Now see, that one doesn't seem to doesn't have the surface tension problems. It stays spread out pretty well. So I'm going to let that set for 10-15 seconds. Okay, again with the cotton swab. It looks a little bit lighter at a certain angle, but we'll see what happens once it dries. No lift. So let's try the Tamiya. A little bit of color lift. So on the Tamiya, on the bare plastic, we did have some lift, and there is a bit of discoloration. So discoloration. It's not bad, but it is noticeable. It may just be a change of sheen between the ultra flat finish and just rubbing the Q-tip on it. Let's rub a Q-tip down here and see if it changes the... Yeah, that could just be from the change in sheen. But anyway, you can see it. Nothing on the AK Real Color. That took it really well. So let's move on to the Vallejo and the Ammo by MIG. Alright, same thing, dip the brush. Now I have dedicated brushes for each one of these products, so there's no cross-contamination going on. So a little bit here. So that's kind of interesting. The Vallejo Model Air doesn't have any surface tension problems, and neither does the Ammo by MIG. So let's let that set for 10-15 seconds. All right, and then taking a clean swabby here. There is a very, you may not even be able to see it, very faint lifting. Not bad at all. And then on the Ammo by MIG, I'm twirling this a little bit so it, you know, does. Yep, nothing going on that one either. So on those two, there was no lift. Well, ultra, just So little lift, I'm not even going to mark it that it's, you know, that it pulled the paint up. And no discoloration at all. So that's good. And then last, we'll do the Mission Models and Vallejo metal color. So first we have the Mission Models, no surface tension problems there. And then, it's kind of hard to see because of the sheen of the aluminum color. Mission Models metal color. So let's let that sit for a minute. Clean swabby. So this one really bled out. So it'll be interesting to see what this one does. This is Mission Models. Had a lot of lift going on there. And we'll see what it's going to do as far as coloration. And I didn't let it set for a minute, like I said, either. It was about 10-15 seconds. Very little bit of paint lift, but no discoloration. So there is discoloration with the Mission Models, and lift, I'm sorry, and discoloration. You can see some obvious tide marks there. On the Vallejo Model Color, there was no discoloration, and the lift was very minor. So I'm going to put that, mark it with an asterisk. Okay, put this down here, minor. Okay, so that was the micro set. So now let's move on to micro sol. Okay, micro sol, again with a dedicated brush for the micro sol product. We'll start at the beginning, and I'll put it next to where I did the micro set. Now I could actually put it on top of it. Yeah, I think I will. I'll put it on top of it as well, because these two products are meant to work together. So we'll see if it reacts differently in conjunction with the micro set that's been applied previously. Okay, so clean Q-tip, cotton bud, whatever you want to call it. Mr. Hobby accretion first across both spots. There's very little bit of lift there. So we got some lift, but no discoloration. Then here, on the part that didn't have the set, no lift. Where it did have set and sol together, no lift. So no discoloration and no lift on that one. Cool. Next, we'll apply it onto the AK Real Color and Tamiya. I'm going to do the same thing across the whole width there. Get that piece of fuzz off. Let that sit for 10-15 seconds. Okay, AK Real Color first with just the sol without being put on top of the set. Kind of dry that off. Very slight. And on top of the micro set, again, very slight. As far as discoloration, there is a little bit, but I'm not sure if that is from no, as it dries it seems to be going away. There's a slight bit of a tide mark. So again, that's going to get an X with an asterisk by it, meaning it's just very slight. So let's do this one here, which is the Tamiya. Got some lift going on there on just the micro sol and set. Very little bit of lift there too. So we got some discoloration and lift. I'm sure you guys saw that I marked that in the wrong column earlier, but you know, sorry. Same with this one. I'll fix it. Okay, so that is that wing. So let's move on to the Vallejo Model Air and the ammo by MiG. Let that set. So let's rub this side here first, just the micro sol. And you can hear I'm not like being ultra gentle with this. A little bit of lift. And then where the micro set was before the micro sol, very little. So we got a very little bit of lift. Discoloration, no. Very slight tide mark right there that basically erases. So no discoloration, just got some lift going. So this one here, it's dried up really quick. Let's rub on it. Whoops, let's do the right side here. A little bit. So we got a little bit of lift there, and what's weird is it's kind of brown. So we got lift, and we have a little bit of discoloration on the ammo by MiG with the micro sol. Discoloration and lift. And the weird thing is that it warmed that gray up a bit. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but here in the real life, it is got a little bit warmer hue to it than the original color. So that's kind of weird. And then the last one for the micro sol is Mission Models and Vallejo Metal Color. So again, you're going to go all the way across where I already put the micro set, and then across on the metal color. Okay, so I've got a feeling we're going to have a lot of discoloration on this Mission Models here. So let's do just where the sol only was. A lot of lift. And where it was sol and set, more lift. So we got Mission Models, micro sol, we have lift and some discoloration. On this one, okay, we're getting some lift going here, but not very much. I mean, you can't really tell it on here, so we don't have any discoloration. Now, if you were to tackle it pretty hard, you might get down to to the primer, but we did get lift, but no discoloration. Next up is the Tamiya Mark Fit. Now, I've used this before, and not very often, but apparently it's some pretty hot stuff. So I'm going to apply it down here and here. I'm trying to keep them from cross-contaminating with the previous fluids. Let that sit. Okay, so Mr. Hobby accretion first. No lift. We'll see if it discolors. So on the Mr. Hobby aqueous, no lift on that one either. And there's no discoloration on either one. So the Mr. Hobby accretion and the aqueous, no discoloration, no lift. Now for the AK Real Color and the Tamiya acrylic. Put some there and there. Okay, so let's wipe this one off. So AK Real Color, no lift. Tamiya, yep, a little bit of lift going on there. So lift on the Tamiya with the Mark Fit. Slight bit of discoloration. Again, it could be the sheen of the paint changing, but it's not doing it on some of the other ones, so that's going to be kind of a kind of a strike against it there. So Tamiya, we got lift and some at least change in sheen. Nothing on here on the AK Real Color. So that's pretty good. Next, we move on to Vallejo and Ammo by MIG. Vallejo Model Air, Ammo by MIG. Ooh. Let that sit and then test it. Clean swabby. A little bit of lift, not enough to get down to the primer. So let's see how that, oh, there's no discoloration either. Ammo by MIG. Got some lift, and again, it's lifting in a weird brown color. And there is discoloration. So Ammo by MIG. We've got Mark Fit, we've got lift and discoloration. Had a little bit of lift on the Model Air. Whoops, I spelled that wrong. A little bit of lift on the Model Air. And then the last one, I'm pretty sure I know how these are going to go. Mission Models and Vallejo Metal Color. All right, here we go. A lot of lift, and it went down to the primer. Not a good thing. And the metal color, whoa. got some lift. So both of them, we got lift. And well, not so much discoloration, but enough lift that it messed up the paint. So I'm going to say discolored because it's discolored. Discoloration on the metal color, yes, but very, very slight. Okay, so that's the Mark Fit. Next, let's try the Solvaset. Now, Solvaset's supposed to be some pretty hot stuff too, but we'll see. So again, we go with the accretion and the Mr. Hobby Aqueous. Okay, so here we go. Here we go. Mr. Hobby Accretion with Solvaset. Yeah, we got some lift that time. And so we got a little bit of lift, but no real discoloration. So that's pretty good. Then on the Aqueous, we got some lift. Aqueous, we got lift and some discoloration. Again, it might be a change in sheen, but it is noticeable, so discoloration. Next, we have AK Real Color and Tamiya. Real Color, whoops, I put it on the wrong side. Real Color and Tamiya. Okay, so Real Color. A little bit of lift. We'll let it dry further to see if there's discoloration. It looks like there is discoloration with that one, but we'll see. And then Tamiya. Got some lift going on. So we got lift on both. And definite discoloration on both of them. Again, it may be sheen, but it's enough that it's really changing the look of it. So we got discoloration on both of those. Next, we move over to the Vallejo Model Air and Ammo by MIG. So we got Model Air, Ammo by MIG, okay, so Vallejo Model Air with clean Q-tip. Got some lift. And some discoloration. Ammo by MIG. Yeah, we got a lot of lift on there. And again, as you can see, it's a weird brown color and it's discolored it quite a bit. So both of those have discoloration and lift. And then finally, Mission Models and Vallejo Metal Color. So Mission Models. Vallejo Metal Color. All right, so here we go. Clean Q-tip. Oh man, that's horrible. Right down to the primer real quick. So we got discoloration and severe lift. Metal color. Very slight amount of lift. Not really any discoloration. So we got lift on the metal color and both on the Mission Models. Okay, so what did we find out? On the different paints, you can see that some did not do well at all in my experiment. So Tamiya pretty much got dinked on everything, as did Mission Models. Ammo by MiG got hit by almost everything except for Micro Set. Vallejo Metal Color, we had a little bit of lift, but only discoloration with the Mark Fit, and that was very minor. Vallejo Model Air actually did better than I thought it would. We had some lift, but not really any discoloration. So if the lift isn't bad and it doesn't discolor it, then it's okay. I mean, if it takes off just a slight amount of paint without going all the way down to the primer like it did here and here, it's not that big a deal as long as it's not discolored. The Mr. Hobby Aqueous did well on everything except for the Solva-Set, which we did have a little bit of lift and discoloration. Oddly enough, not having any experience with accretion, I was kind of pleasantly surprised that the only thing we had was a very slight amount of lift with the Microsol and Solva-Set without discoloration. The closest thing to discoloration was the Solva-Set, and again, that just made it's almost, man, I just can't determine if it's really discolored or what. But so that's how it worked out so far. So the next part I need to do is I need to test everything on the paints, but on top of clear. So I put a clear barrier coat. So I'm going to see how that works. Now you've seen how I am conducting this experiment. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with the clear, but I'm not going to do it on camera. You're just going to have to trust that I'm doing it exactly the same and not fudging anything, because I got nothing to gain here. It's just an experiment. So I'm going to do it off camera, and then I'll come back and talk about the results. Okay, so here is the results of the clear tests. Really not a lot of difference, although it's kind of odd that Tamiya, I did get some discoloration even with the clear coat. So that's kind of strange. By and large, there's not much problem with the stuff on a clear coat, but like, you know, again, the Tamiya, discoloration and lift, which just shows that a clear coat, if you're not careful, might not be totally covering, might be a bit porous. I'm sure it's depending on what kind you use. But, you know, the Solva-Set's pretty hot, so I did get a reaction on most of them, except for the metal color. I didn't get any discoloration or lift. Same with the Vallejo Model Air. The AK Real Color, there was a slight bit of discoloration, probably just from the rubbing on the rubbing on it with a Q-tip. So now let me talk a little bit about this stuff. So, number one, especially with the, say, the Mark Fit and the Solvaset, when that is applied over a decal, you're not really going to be rubbing it. I mean, number one, it'll wreck the decal. It was just merely to see how much of an effect it has on the paint and the clear-coated paint. So just know that doing that, I know that you're not supposed to do that. And if you don't know it, you shouldn't, because generally it's, you know, anytime you read anything about decals and applying setting solutions, is you apply it sparingly. You don't want it to puddle up, because then you will get discoloration from tide marks and stuff like that. But don't touch it. Just leave it and let it evaporate. And I did put some on the middle part of each panel, and with the exception of the Mission Models, see, now that rubbed off. So there was a little bit of a tide mark, and it's been sitting for a while, so it should have been dry. So I just wiped it off, and it didn't discolor anything on this. So you're not going to have a problem if you follow the instructions. There was no discoloration even on the Ammo by MIG, which everything else seemed to be turning it brown. So when you apply your setting solutions, just make sure you don't touch it. If you need to get rid of some setting solution, my recommendation is to use like a paper towel or even a cotton swab, and just touch it barely to the edge and let the Q-tip or the paper towel wick it away. You don't want to rub on it. So I just put some on the bare paint because I want to see how that reacts. So we'll give that time to completely air dry. Okay, so just in fairness, I put some Solvaset on the bare plastic. Nothing at all with the accretion. Slight bit of sheen difference on the Mr. Hobby Aqueous. And really, if you're careful and keep it on the decal, that wouldn't be a deal. AK Real Color, it lightened it up a little bit. Tamiya left a tide mark. Changed the sheen a bit. Vallejo Model Air, same thing. I think I let that one puddle up though a little bit too much, because there's a little bit of a tide mark, but the rest of it's fine. Ammo by MIG, a little bit of tide mark around the edges, which actually wiped off, so it didn't discolor. Mission Models, a little bit of a tide mark again, but not really any change in color. It's just when you rub the Mission Models, you get a change in sheen, but that's the paint, and I'll get to more of that in a minute. And nothing discernible, and maybe because of the color and the finish and the specularity of it's not allowing to see anything, but nothing really on there. So there's all that. So I want to conduct one more experiment, and that is on some modified Mission Models paint. So in doing some research with the Mission Models paint, I was hipped to a way to do the Mission Models paint in a way that makes it more durable and gives it more of a semi-gloss, as opposed to their much vaunted by the Mission Models people eggshell finish. So as you can see here, I don't want to get into the paint too much because that's a completely different thing. But what I did was, on the Mission Models paint, on the recommendation of John at Model Paint Solutions, he has a formula of Mission Models thinner that includes Mission Models clear primer, and a flow improver. Liquitex. In my case, I use the Vallejo flow improver because I have some. And you mix that up with your paint about 50-50, and it gives you a more transparent paint, but you can build it up in layers, and this is what I ended up with. Same color here and here. So as you can see, it's kind of a semi-gloss, and it's supposed to be more durable. So I'm going to apply some of these products right onto this bare paint here. So I'm going to do that off camera just because, you know, you've seen how I do it, and I don't want to take up a lot of time. So let me do that real quick, and I'll come back and talk about my observations. Okay, first is the micro set, and I've applied it on there and let it set for a few seconds, like as if I were bumbling around with my decal. And then taking the no paint lift and no discoloration. So that is the micro set. Okay, with the micro sol, I put it right here, and it had some tide marks, but I was able to wipe those off with the Q-tip and just rubbing where it was. Again, this, you really wouldn't be doing this. I'm just testing how strong it is on here. Worst case scenarios, and it was just ever so slight. You may not even be able to see the amount of lift on here, but nothing compared to the bare paint. So there you go. Mark Fit is right here. It's still drying, as is the Solva set. So I'm going to rub a little bit of the edge here on the Mark Fit just to see if it will remove the tide marks. Again, just a very slight amount of lift, but no discoloring. Even looking dead on where it is still drying, there's no issues. Then right here, this is the Solva set, and in wiping it off, again, you wouldn't be doing this. I'm just doing it to test how caustic this is on here. So a very slight amount of lift, no discoloration. Now this has had time to dry, so I'm going to kind of rub it a little bit. And no discoloration. So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that this mix is really good. So there's that also to consider in the whole grand scheme of things. So basically, that is it. My whole purpose in this, and again, let me preface what I'm about to say with, you know, your mileage may vary. People are going to have all kinds of mitigating circumstances, all kinds of different possibilities, like whether with the acrylic lacquer hybrid paints like Tamiya and AK Real Color and Aqueous, you're going to have different things happen. And if you use like a lacquer based thinner, so this was not supposed to be an all encompassing experiment. It was just really an experiment for myself to see how things work, and to see what products work best with certain paints and finishes. So hopefully this has been kind of informative, and really it's just something to give you pause for thought when you're applying stuff to your model. The all clad aqua gloss clear, if I'd have used a different clear, I may have gotten entirely different results. So again, really it boils down to a lot of experimentation on your own to see what kind of things happen with different finishes and different products that you're putting on top of those finishes. What sparked this for me was a kit I did recently where I used the Mission Models paint and I used the Mark Fit, and it did a horrible job of lifting the paint, but that could have been partially due, it was partially due to probably some improper mixing on my part for the paint, and also maybe I didn't let it sit long enough. But people get antsy and they want to get going on their kit, so sometimes they don't let it last or sit as long as it should. One thing I will note, and I was surprised, was it seems to me that the most durable paint out of all of the paints I tried was the Mr. Hobby Accretion paint. Now that one I bought on a whim because I went into a store that actually had it in stock. And just using their high compatibility thinner with the Accretion, I was really, really surprised by the durability of that paint. So there's that. Something to think about. So anyway, I think that will pretty much conclude it. So what I'm going to do is I'll take a still of this chart and I will put it at the end of the video so you can pause it and maybe look at it. You know, if you think it might be helpful, take a screenshot of it. And again, this is by no means supposed to be like a totally scientific thing. I mean, there's all kinds of controls that could have been, you know, employed and everything else. This is just like some real world monkeying around with paint and setting solutions. So I hope it was interesting. Put any comments down in the comments section down below. If you did like the video, hit the like button if you would. That would be cool. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, you might subscribe because, you know, I plan on doing more experimentation stuff, such as my acrylic primer and paint experiment. I'll put a link to that on the end screen. So, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and my little experiment with paints and decal solvents. So until next time, I'll see you all later.